Amazing turnaround, Millionaire loses it all, but a cleaner's whisper reveals a hidden secret. Jack Thompson ran a finger along the dusty windowsill of his crumbling Chicago apartment, the memories of a once glamorous life clawing at him like the sharp edges of betrayal. He had everything: a successful career as a top attorney, a lavish home, and the respect of his peers, until envy brewed within the firm, tearing him apart. Every day he glanced at the stark walls, the peeling paint a visual metaphor for his life unraveling. Now, he was a mere shadow of himself, enveloped in shame and the hollow echo of past accolades. As he rummaged through the clutter left behind by his own neglect, a soft voice floated through the thin walls. It was Beatrice, the elderly cleaning lady, telling tales of a forgotten family legacy. His ears perked up. Her hushed tone spoke of hidden treasures tucked away in an ancient art gallery he had once admired as a young man. "There are priceless works down there," she said, her voice rich with nostalgia, "a history my family fought to protect." What captured Jack's attention through the fog of his musings was the thought that this hidden legacy could offer him a flicker of purpose. Maybe it was a chance to reclaim not just material wealth but also a sense of integrity he thought he'd lost. That prospect jarred his instinctual wariness. While his heart whispered about redemption, his mind recoiled from the memories of deceit and betrayal that turned his trust into ash. Hadn't he seen too many of his colleagues succumb to greed, sacrificing their morals for quick gains? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue, but now couldn't he escape the grasp of his former colleagues circling like sharks? All of them watching, waiting, his reputation as brittle as the paper outside his door, ready to be torn to shreds once again. Jack envisioned the meeting that loomed ahead. Would he lean into his past, into the dishonest, self-serving dealings that had almost cost him everything? Or should he work alongside Beatrice toward an honest resolution, perhaps reviving his own standing in doing so? Each option pulsated through him, battling for supremacy. Temptation filled his veins like poison. He could smell the scent of wealth again. Recreating the past had never felt so accessible. But then, he heard Beatrice's voice echo in his mind, invoking the values he thought he lost. He felt a pressure in his chest as he weighed his choices, torn between two lives: a legacy born of sweat and persistence, or one thinly veiled in corruption. As the clock ticked ever closer to that pivotal meeting, while he paced the dim room, Jack's stomach twisted. Imagine siding with what felt so intimately familiar, yet deeply wrong. The ghosts of his misdeeds loomed over him, whispering doubts. One path offered him potential freedom from ruin, yet it came at the price of his soul. The other demanded an arduous climb back into the light, where past shadows lingered heavy. With apprehension mounting within him, he suddenly stood frozen at the threshold of transformation, poised to step toward either shameful wealth or hard-earned authenticity. His pulse quickened not just from uncertainty but from the realization that a single decision could chart the course of his life forever. In his anticipation, darkness loomed just out of reach, and as the churning thoughts spiraled through his mind, he took a breath and prepared to step out into the unknown. Jack's heart pounded as he stepped out of his apartment, the burden of indecision trailing behind him like a shadow. Each footfall echoed on the worn staircase, a reminder of the heights he had once occupied, and the abyss he now faced. He paused, taking a deep breath before heading down to the street, where the bustling city life seemed almost foreign, as if he no longer belonged to it. The meeting with his former colleagues loomed large in his mind. He was trapped in a loop of anxiety, reliving the cruel betrayals he had both executed and endured. The memory of their mocking laughter echoed in the corridors of his memory, and with each passing second, he felt the weight of that past pressing down on him harder than before. The gravity of his decision sharpened, drawing into focus a desperate need for clarity. As he walked, the chill of the autumn wind rustled the fallen leaves around him, prompting Jack to reflect on the promise of a legacy what Beatrice had described as a story of resilience and valor. The idea of uncovering hidden treasures sparked a flicker of hope within him. What if those artworks represented not just monetary value, but a deeper connection to his own identity, a sense of purpose that had long eluded him? The more he considered it, the more he felt a pull towards authenticity, enhanced by the gentle urging of Beatrice's wise words, yet, caution gripped him. He remembered the allure of the life he once led, the power, the influence, and the relationships forged in deceit. Even the sinister beauty of that world enticed him, its whispers promising success again. Could he truly walk away from a path paved with seduction and safety? Or was that yearning merely a vestige of a man who no longer existed? Determined not to yield to passive thoughts, Jack entered a small cafe, hoping for a moment of solace. As he ordered a black coffee, he struck up a conversation with the barista, a young woman with an infectious enthusiasm for art. Her stories of exhibitions and personal discoveries made Jack realize something profound. Art wasn't merely about possession, it was an expression of truth, vulnerability, and connection. Each piece told a story beyond its canvas. It struck him how he had been navigating life through the lens of status instead of genuine experiences. With his coffee in hand, Jack took a seat near the window, the aroma stirring warmth inside him as he grabbed a napkin and jotted down thoughts, his wishes, fears, and the compelling narrative of legacy that beckoned him now. His mind flooded with ideas of how he could turn the whispers of his former self into a roar of resolve. Reviving the art legacy, collaborating with Beatrice, and redefining what it meant to succeed, that could be his new venture. Suddenly, a chilling realization crashed down on him: the meeting with his colleagues was imminent. He needed to prepare himself, to arm himself with clarity and conviction to navigate the impending storm. He could feel the tide shifting within him, a tidal wave of clarity washing away the doubts that had long lingered. The decision took shape in his mind. Newly emboldened, he realized that he would not merely walk toward the shadows of his past or succumb to a potential rebirth rooted in deceit. Instead, he would confront it all, standing at the intersection of who he was and who he wanted to become. As he finished his coffee, a newfound determination surged within him. The thought of exploring that hidden art legacy alongside Beatrice seemed not just appealing but essential, a crucial step toward redemption. With his head clearer than ever, as he approached the door to the cafe, a picture flashed in his mind, a warning against slipping back into the comfort of dishonesty. Outside, the shadows of the past stirred, restless and hungry for his attention. Jack felt the weight of choice looming again. Would he meet his former colleagues today as a broken man seeking favors or as a resolute individual ready to take ownership of his fate? With that question lingering in his heart, he stepped back into the cacophony of the city, ready to face whatever awaited him, propelled by the drive to sculpt a new chapter of his life. But lurking in the distance were the signs of consequence, a force waiting to test his resolve. Would he pass the test, or would he find himself weighed down again by the very things he sought to escape? The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows as Jack made his way towards the building that housed his former colleagues. A riot of emotion stirred within him, a blend of trepidation and fierce resolve. He could almost hear the echoes of their critical voices, but he closed his thoughts off with each purposeful step. Today would be different. As he approached the polished glass doors, Jack took a moment to collect himself, recalling the conversations he had with the barista in the cafe. Art had become his lodestar, representing honesty and connection. Pushing through the door, he was immediately drowned in the chaos of lively conversation and a familiar scent of polished leather and expensive cologne. The cocktail of nostalgia and anxiety threatened to engulf him. Yet, he brushed it aside, adjusting his posture and allowing a spark of confidence to push through the anxiety. As he scanned the room, his eyes landed on familiar faces, each one a reminder of both his peak and his downfall. "Jack!" A voice boomed from across the room. It was Frank, a former ally turned adversary. There was a warmth in Frank's greeting that felt insincere, like sugar coating a bitter pill. Jack plastered on a smile as he approached. "Frank, good to see you," Jack replied, shaking hands. His mind was racing. He could feel every ounce of expectation ready to unravel around him. He was stepping into an arena where masks were the norm, everyone playing their role in the good cop, bad cop play of the corporate world. As stories unfolded and pleasantries exchanged, Jack found himself reflecting on his authentic self, one shaped through art, discovery, and vulnerability. No longer interested in trading barbs over who had outmaneuvered whom, he focused instead on the discussions of legacy and creativity. Each topic felt like a siren calling to the hidden treasures within him. When the conversation transitioned toward a new project based on community art initiatives, Jack seized the moment. "You know, there is something exciting about art being a bridge," he said, allowing passion to replace hesitance. "It's more than just a financial valuation, it's about creating connections and sharing experiences." A murmur rippled through the room. He could see shifting glances among his peers, some intrigued, others skeptical. Frank raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by Jack's newfound fervor. "You think art can bridge that gap?" he asked, voice laced with disbelief. "Absolutely," Jack pressed on, feeling a tide of conviction rise within him. "It can elevate conversations from mere transactions to true engagement. Think about it, what we do here can be more meaningful than just numbers." Laughter bubbled over, and Jack internalized the sting. Yet, it reinforced his resolve, he wouldn't be silenced by their disdain. He was forging a new identity, etching his voice into the narrative. As conversations continued, he shifted his focus to possible collaborations, especially with Beatrice, visualizing their collective effort as a tapestry woven with authenticity. When he finally excused himself, stepping away from the overwhelming atmosphere, Jack felt as if he had existed in two worlds simultaneously, a contractor of deceit and a creator of connections. Walking to his car, he felt lighter, not entirely unburdened, but undeniably freer from the chains that once held him back. Suddenly, an idea struck him with force: why not curate an exhibition as an ode to hidden legacies? To create a conversation around art, identity, and transformation, available for public engagement? As he drove away, excitement built anew, but it was laced with a refined anxiety. Facing his previous colleagues had summoned self-doubt while unlocking a pathway toward authentic expression. He realized that navigating this new endeavor would bring as many challenges as revelations. How would he confront pushback from those who could oppose his blossoming vision? Yet within that uncertainty, a thrilling anticipation ignited as questions loomed in his mind: what revelations might arise as he intertwines his past with this new venture in art? And how far would he have to go to confront the reluctant parts of his former self? As he parked, newfound determination surged again, invigorating him. The day had drawn to a close, but Jack knew the real journey was just beginning. What awaited him on this unpaved road of artistic exploration? With the car parked and the engine shut off, Jack sat for a moment, staring out through the windshield at the evening sky. The vibrant hues of pink and orange were fading into purple, signaling the end of another day. But for Jack, it marked the beginning of something transformative, a journey of emotional and creative rebirth. Yet, doubt still danced at the edges of his mind, a persistent whisper urging him to retreat to safety. Stepping out and making his way to the modest art studio he had rented, Jack noted how much the world around him had changed. Each step felt heavier than the last as apprehension slid back in. Would he secure the support he needed for his exhibition? Would Beatrice take him seriously, or would she dismiss his vision as a fleeting whim? Upon entering the studio, the space enveloped him in warmth and familiar scents: canvas, paint, and wood. It was here he felt most invigorated, as artistic possibilities unfurled before him like an endless pathway. The concrete walls, now splattered with patches of color, provided a visceral reflection of his tumultuous inner state. He wanted to create something so profound it would resonate with people, yet fear of failure loomed large. As evening settled in, Jack set up a small workstation. Brushes awaited their colors, and empty canvases yearned for stories to be told. Inspiration flickered like a candle in the wind. He pulled out a sketchbook and began to write down concepts for the exhibition. What themes would truly reflect his journey? Could he encapsulate the essence of transformation without veering into cliché? He found himself drifting deeper into thought, visualizing pieces that would narrate his struggles and triumphs. His fingers traced the outlines of potential artworks, each stroke stirring flickers of hope and revelation. It wasn't just about showcasing art but about cultivating dialogue, inviting viewers to dive into the layers of identity, hidden legacies, and the beauty of vulnerability. But self-doubt clawed back, whispering reminders of the ridicule and disdain he had faced earlier. "What do you know about art?" A voice echoed from memory, meant to paralyze him. It was Frank's challenge, still pungent, still painful. Jack clenched his jaw, defiance rising within him. He had to confront those shadows. He couldn't allow past judgments to dictate his present. Jack felt determination strengthen his resolve as he grabbed a brush and began slinging paint onto the canvas, letting his emotions flow freely. With each stroke, he rediscovered pieces of himself long buried beneath the facade of success and pretense. As night deepened and the studio was bathed in the glow of a single lamp, Jack's vision grew clearer. Every contrast of color represented not only his struggles but the potential for understanding and reconnection. Gradually, a form began to emerge from the chaos, a striking mural that told a story of loss transforming into rebirth, illustrating the delicate dance between despair and hope. Exhausted yet exhilarated, Jack stepped back to examine his work, heart racing at the magnitude of what he was creating. This wasn't merely an exhibition but rather a declaration, a manifesto etched in paint that encapsulated his voyage. And suddenly, the scope of what he wished to accomplish spiraled beyond his initial ambitions. This wasn't just art for art's sake, it was art as a transformative instrument, something that could inspire others to uncover their paths. But as excitement surged, so did the realization of resistance that awaited him. Like Frank, there would be naysayers and opponents, people who would deem his effort pointless. How could he combat their contempt without losing himself in the fight? He took a deep, steadying breath, aware that the road ahead would demand as much stamina as creativity. The morning after, he would meet with Beatrice, and she might just be the key to bringing his vision to life. Would she share in his enthusiasm? Or would he face yet another wall of dismissal? Jack paused, the weight of uncertainty heavy in his chest, but he felt a spark. This was his moment. It was now or never. The thought of potential rejection crashed down, but within it, the promise of revelation thrummed, louder than before. The journey into his artistic awakening felt precarious, but Jack understood one essential truth: he was ready to confront whatever awaited him beyond the next steps toward his exhibition. He had already changed so much, and yet, he had yet to confront his greatest challenge. The time had come to face not only the critics but also the parts of himself he had hidden away. How would the confrontation unfold? What pieces of his past would resurface, and how might they shape the artist he was destined to become? The morning light filtered through the studio windows, casting warm shadows across the array of unfinished works. Jack stood before his latest mural, now a dynamic interplay of colors that reflected the tumult of his thoughts. His heart raced with anticipation and anxiety as he prepared for his meeting with Beatrice. Would she see the potential he felt surging within him? Or would she, like others before, see nothing but a pipe dream? He organized his materials with a focus that bordered on ritualistic. Each brush was aligned, each canvas ready to tell its story. As Jack cleared his mind, he could hear the faint echo of his worries: rejection, dismissal, doubts that had policed his confidence. He banished them to the back of his mind, forcing himself to envision success, the way Beatrice's encouragement could transform the trajectory of his artistic career. On his way to the gallery, Jack rehearsed his pitch. He had crafted articulate sentences filled with passion and purpose, fueled by the urgency of his mission. This was more than just presenting artwork, it was about sharing his narrative, an artistic endeavor wrought from personal struggles and triumphs. He reached the gallery, its minimalist facade promising sophistication within. The owner, Beatrice, greeted him with a warm smile. Her confidence immediately put him at ease, but it wasn't long before the familiar tightening in his stomach returned. "Jack, it's wonderful to see you," she said, motioning for him to follow her inside. The gallery glittered with polished floors and bright white walls, a blank canvas in its own right, waiting for the stories he could provide. As they settled into her office, Jack felt the walls closet in slightly, the pressure amplifying his nervous energy. He began recounting his journey, how art had become his lifeline through testing times, an emotional release that healed rather than harmed. He laid out the conceptual framework of his exhibition, pointing to sketches and mock-ups of his pieces. "Your work is compelling, Jack. I can see a real narrative here," Beatrice noted, her eyes darting between the sketches and his face. Encouraged, he delved deeper, sharing his vulnerability and how each painting captured not just his struggles, but the life lessons that had transformed him. But the moment was abruptly punctured by the sharpness of her question. "What makes you think your work will resonate with a wider audience? Art is subjective, and not everyone will connect with your experience." The air crackled with tension. Jack felt every muscle in his body tense, the very core of his being compressing under that inquiry. It compelled him to confront not just Beatrice, but the most raw parts of himself, the insecurities rooted deeply in his past, lit by the flames of critique and judgment. "Because their stories are my stories," he replied, forcing clarity through the tumult. "I've realized that it's not about perfection or popularity. It's about authenticity. People are hungry for connection in today's world. My art is a reflection of the journeys we all navigate, the beauty and chaos inherent in that process." For a beat, silence enveloped them. Beatrice's expression shifted from skepticism to contemplative. The insufferable burden of doubt dared to creep back in, but Jack held its gaze, refusing to let it consume him. "Interesting perspective," Beatrice finally said, her professional demeanor softening. "Let us explore this further. I believe there's potential here." He felt the tide shifting, his determination stoked by her openness. Jack laid out his vision for the exhibition not merely as an art display but as an experience that could engage the heart and provoke thought. As they discussed logistics and potential opening dates, Jack's enthusiasm surged. He could almost see the pieces coming together. A mural of resilience continued beyond its canvas, uniting lives and experiences through shared humanity. For the first time in a long while, he dared to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he could succeed against the shroud of doubt that loomed behind him. But with every ambition radiating from within, a lingering question clawed at the edges of his mind. What happens when the enthusiasm wanes, and he is forced to face the voice of the critic once more? The meeting concluded, and as Beatrice expressed her support, Jack left the gallery bolstered but acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Doubt could hit harder than before, undermining the momentum he was beginning to build. Yet, he understood one undeniable truth: every step he took on this journey of transformation would demand deeper courage. He was on the precipice of something profound, yet raw with the unpredictability of creative vulnerability. How far might he forge ahead before the echoes of doubt became too loud to silence? Outside, the sun blazed bright, a symbol of the new path that lay ahead. Jack took a deep breath, determined to hold fast to the prospect of creative rebirth, but sensing that the real test would emerge soon enough. Did he have the grit to embrace whatever challenges awaited him? That thought lingered, ballooning beyond simple anticipation, filling him with resolve and dread alike. As Jack walked away from the gallery, his mind hummed with ideas and visions, yet the shadows whispered reminders of his past failures, rehearsing the doubts that had trailed his every step like an echo. He felt a peculiar blend of hope and anxiety as the reality of his situation settled in. He was on the brink of an artistic breakthrough, but fame or the lack thereof could drive him back into obscurity. He decided to return to his studio, where the familiar smell of paint and the sight of unfinished canvases awaited him. It felt sacred in its disorder, the space a silent witness to his struggles and victories. He approached the unfinished mural, now imbued with the day's collective energy, and picked up his brush with determination. He began translating his emotions onto the canvas, each stroke a statement against the self-doubt that loomed over him. Yet, with every smudge and splatter of color, an unsettling thought crept back into his mind: how could he maintain the connection he felt with Beatrice, and how could he turn this opportunity into something sustainable? The fear of being misunderstood lingered. Could his art resonate with the audience he imagined? In this moment of introspection, he turned his gaze from the canvas to the pile of sketches cluttering his workspace. The sketches represented different facets of his experience: anguish, joy, resilience. But had he communicated these effectively? He began sorting through them, contemplating the specific messages he wanted each piece to relay. He felt he had something genuine to reveal, but would he be able to articulate it in a way that reached the hearts of many? Jack spent hours refining his sketches, jotting down thoughts and emotional connections meant to accompany each one. By the time he eased back onto his stool, exhaustion settled into his bones, but there was a fire ignited within him. This wasn't about creating pretty pictures, it was about laying bare his struggles which might resonate with the unvoiced aches of others. Then the dreaded specter of doubt re-emerged, lurking like a specter. What if these raw emotions repelled rather than attracted? What if vulnerability didn't lead to connection but instead opened his work to harsh critique? The ghosts of previous exhibitions flashed in his mind: cold receptions, critic scorn, the gnawing feeling of inadequacy. But Jack forced himself to wrestle with these worries. He recalled Beatrice's uplifting words about authenticity. She had seen potential where others had turned away. Instead of succumbing to fear, he began to design an interactive element for the exhibition. He yearned to invite the audience into his journey, allowing them to explore their own vulnerabilities. Was he ready to face what lay on the other side of that connection? As he brainstormed how to present this, a small but nagging voice echoed a crucial truth: this would require more than courage. It would also demand a willingness to confront past vulnerabilities and the critics who loomed large over his artistic aspirations. He would need to lean into the discomfort that came with unveiling his essence to the world. Marooned in thought, Jack glanced outside as dusk fell, the palette of day transforming under a canvas of stars. He felt an electrifying surge of determination amidst the uncertainty. His mission was to share a deeper part of himself that yearned for understanding, and he wouldn't shy away from that challenge. Grabbing his phone, he sent a message to Beatrice, suggesting a brainstorming session over the coming week. He needed her feedback on how to structure the exhibition to ensure it encapsulated the intricate narrative of his art. But, just as resolve enveloped him, another layer of anxiety crept in. What if Beatrice had misread him? What if the market didn't care for authenticity? The echoes of that possibility loomed like a storm on the horizon, ready to burst and drown him in doubt once more. As night deepened, Jack felt the weight of the impending storm he had invited. He would soon have to confront critics, possibly facing the very judgments he feared. Could he survive the scrutiny? The prospect of pursuing his vision and the shadows of doubt both clung to him like an inseparable pair. Would he unfold the layers of his artistic identity, or would he retreat into the safety of silence once more? In the back of his mind loomed the haunting question: how would he navigate the treacherous waters ahead, and would he ultimately have the strength to embrace his truth? Daylight crept into Jack's studio the next morning, spilling over the chaotic landscape of colors and canvases. He stared at his mural, now a patchwork of emotions, yet he sensed a nagging void. It became increasingly clear the interactive element he had envisioned would only enrich the narrative. It needed depth, authenticity, an edge that showcased his vulnerability. The question of how to reveal this essence of self loomed larger than the canvases themselves. He took a breath, inhaling the familiar scent of paint mixed with linseed oil. He needed a plan. His mind whirled with images of the exhibition. He envisioned visitors interacting with each piece, touch points for their thoughts, a space to reflect. But what if they didn't engage? The fear of creating a display that fell flat gripped him, yet he had yet to identify the core of his fears. Jack retrieved a scrap of paper, and as he scribbled potential questions for his audience, clarity punctured his mind like a bolt of lightning. Each question would not solely invite feedback, they would mirror his insecurities, engaging viewers to reflect on their own truths. The realization came rushing in: if he challenged them to explore their emotions, perhaps they would reciprocate. This symbiosis could ignite connections he so desperately craved. Yet within this empowering vision, another shadow emerged. What if the audience rejected his probing? He had witnessed the dismissive reactions of critics before. Dread coiled tightly in his stomach. What if he bared his soul only to receive apathy? Jack closed his eyes tightly, attempting to dispel the worry. He could only knit together the patchwork fragments of his experience with honesty. Once that was on display, how the world received it was beyond his control. Fueled by determination, he grabbed his phone to schedule his brainstorming session with Beatrice. This wasn't just another meeting, it was a pivotal moment. He sought her discreet wisdom, the ability to coax out ideas that he had yet to articulate. As he texted her, his heart raced, a mix of eagerness and trepidation. Would she see the potential and urgency in what he proposed? The afternoon light poured liberally through his studio window as the minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. While he waited for her reply, Jack dove into a new sketch, this one more vibrant than the rest. Each curve on the page symbolized the tumultuous journey he was on, a constant grappling with self-worth. He questioned whether his endeavor would yield anything worthwhile. With a quick flick of his wrist, he added a dark shadow to the figure central to the piece. This time, it didn't symbolize despair but rather resilience. Perhaps acceptance of one's imperfections could become an artwork in itself. Just as he laid down the final brushstroke, a ping from his phone broke the taut silence in the studio. Beatrice's reply lit up the screen, a simple, absolutely. When and where? The surge of excitement zipped through him. At last, he could voice his ideas, he could mold his visions with her input. Setting a time for their meet stirred ambition within him, but at the same time laid bare an undeniable truth. He had relied heavily on her insights, visibly leaning into his doubts instead of standing firm in his own convictions. Was he bolstering his uncertainty by seeking reassurance, or was he simply nurturing his desire for connection? Jack found himself entrapped in a cycle of dependency. How much of his identity was shaped by others? As he grappled with this revelation, the shadows returned, larger and darker than before. He felt the weight of imposter syndrome settle back in the pit of his stomach, feeding on his ambitions and fortifying his fears. What if during his meeting, he faltered, revealing his lack of belief in the vision he crafted? The echo of his vulnerability surfaced as he now questioned whether he was prepared to shoulder the pressure of this vulnerability in front of someone he admired deeply. Jack's fingers tightened around the brush he grasped. He needed to find clarity and ultimately a way to unveil his truth. He could sense the impending confrontation with his insecurities looming nearer, like a storm on the horizon, ready to unleash its fury. As he rehearsed his thoughts in his mind, an unsettling stillness filled the air. He stood on the precipice of self-discovery, and there was no turning back now. Would he be able to reclaim his narrative, or would the forthcoming meeting with Beatrice expose fractures he hadn't yet reconciled? With these questions layered thick upon his heart, Jack grasped the paintbrush tighter, ready to confront himself and, inevitably, the responsibility of sharing his truth. But what awaited him in that room with Beatrice? Would their collaboration propel him forward or unearth everything he was terrified to acknowledge? As the hour approached for his meeting with Beatrice, Jack fought against the whirlpool of doubt that threatened to drag him under. He paced the confines of his studio, the bright colors surrounding him offering an ironic contrast to the murky emotions tumbling within. Each step echoed his escalating anxiety, his heart raced, thundering like a bass drum in the silence that he glanced at the collection of unfinished pieces scattered about, fragments of his artistic journey, each one representing a part of himself he was only beginning to understand. They held layers of his creative struggles, yet today they felt like glaring affirmations of his shortcomings. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was staring down the precipice of failure. Would the questions he prepared breathe life into his vision, or would they shine a light on his inadequacy? The clock ticked toward their appointment. Jack placed a hand on his chest, feeling the pounding heartbeat beneath his palm. He inhaled deeply, attempting to center himself, but the practice only magnified the tension in his body. He was on a tightrope, with each breath threatening to disrupt his balance. Would he find a new perspective in his meeting, or would the encounter expose the fragments of his resolve? In a moment of desperation, he reached for the mirror hanging on the wall, a simple piece that had borne witness to his countless reflections and self-doubts. He studied the man staring back at him, searching for conviction in those familiar features. There was passion there, if only he could harness it. "What do you want to say?" He whispered to his reflection, hoping for a response. Suddenly, he felt the weight of the built-up fear transform into something more dynamic, a potent blend of determination and hope. In that moment, he made a decision. He would not only present his ideas, he would share the rawness behind them. The intricacies of his creative process, the struggles, the questions, the almost obsessive quest for approval would all bubble to the surface. With renewed purpose, he grabbed his sketchpad and flipped through his recent work, memories flooding back, the late nights filled with self-critique, the moments of inspiration that arrived like sudden gusts, and the painful realization of perfection that was always out of reach. He brushed his fingers over the page, his hands steadying. "This is your truth," he reminded himself. "Own it." Finally, with each heartbeat echoing purpose, he left his studio and headed to the cafe where Beatrice would wait. The walk offered him clarity amidst the chaos. As the morning light wrapped around him, illuminating the mundane with potential energy, Jack felt a shift. He wasn't just approaching a collaborator, he was approaching a catalyst for his own transformation. Upon arrival, he found Beatrice seated at a small table near the window, her pencil poised over a notepad. When their eyes met, he caught a glimmer of encouragement in her gaze that pushed him to believe he could do this. He took a seat, and as they exchanged pleasantries, the air thickened with anticipation. Jack's mind raced with the vision of his mural, a canvas eager for the rich tapestry of their creative exchange. He leaned in, ready to initiate a new dialogue based on transparency. "Beatrice, he started, steeling himself, "I want to show the messy parts. The doubts. I think that's where the depth lies." Yet, just as those words began to escape, a tremor of anxiety threatened to uncoil his momentum. He could feel the walls of defensiveness inching up around him, a panicked whisper urging him to self-censor. Would he really dare lay his vulnerabilities bare? With Beatrice's thoughtful gaze fixed on him, the moment hung suspended in the air. Jack breathed deeply, confronting the reality that the true art would be in the vulnerability of sharing his less-than-perfect self. But as he prepared to peel back the layers, he couldn't shake the nagging question: would he find solace in his honesty, or would it shatter the image he desperately sought to uphold, the intensity of? The moment surged like a tempest. In this crucial exchange, his path would either illuminate a newfound confidence or plunge him into uncertainty. Would he emerge with an empowered vision, or would the situation expose the frailty of his carefully constructed facade? The stakes had never felt higher, and he was ready to leap. As Jack sat across from Beatrice, the weight of expectation hung between them like an unspoken promise. He sensed her anticipation, yet the fear that coursed through him pressed tighter, threatening to suffocate his resolve. His mouth felt dry, a hot knot forming in his throat as he debated whether to disclose the raw truths behind his art. "Beatrice," he began, and the desperation in his voice broke through his hesitation, "I want to take risks. Not just color outside the lines but explore the spaces where I feel most vulnerable." He met her steady gaze, searching for signs of affirmation. "Good." Her response came swiftly, laced with a no-nonsense clarity that momentarily eased his anxiety. "Vulnerability generates authenticity. What you're proposing could resonate with people, change the narrative of how we view art." Jack allowed himself to breathe, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. Yet, beneath that flicker lingered a shadow of fear of exposing the imperfections that had haunted him for so long. Through the barrier of their conversation, he felt a flickering tension, a dance between his instinct to guard himself and the urgency to reveal. But what if it doesn't work? What if they don't understand? He asked, the question slipping out before he could stifle it. "Art isn't about universal approval. It's about your truth. That's where real connection happens." Beatrice leaned back, studying him. "Tell me what kind of mural you envision. Don't hold back." In that moment, Jack tapped into something deeper, a reservoir of ideas waiting to flow. "I want to illustrate the dichotomy of public perception versus personal reality," he said, his words gaining momentum. "It'll showcase the cheerful facade people wear against the struggles they tolerate every day. I want to include fragmented images, shattered reflections, hidden scars, all the things we hide. Yes. There's power in that. Beatrice's enthusiasm radiated warmth, and her pencil danced over the notepad. Encouraged, Jack continued to share. He outlined the layers of color he imagined, vivid contrasts to echo the chaos of emotion beneath them. The dialogue became more fluid as he recalibrated his focus, prioritizing the message over his insecurities, but as his vision gathered steam, a wave of self-doubt resurfaced unexpectedly, crashing into his enthusiasm. I've never tackled something so personal in public before. What if people reject it? Then they reject it. But that doesn't diminish its value. Your unique perspective is your currency in this world. The firmness in her voice cut through his fear like a knife. Art is risk, Jack. It's a gamble. But aren't we all just hoping our stories will land with someone? Her words ignited a flicker of defiance. Jack leaned back, absorbing her insistence. Okay, he whispered, I'll own it. I'll create it. The newfound determination seeped into his bones, a sensation he hadn't felt in ages, like picking up a brush for the first time, unfamiliar yet exhilarating. Beatrice nodded knowingly, her expression one of belief, a promise of partnership that seemed to strengthen his resolve even further. Yet, beneath his excitement lay a nagging interrogation: what lay at the heart of this unveiling? Would acknowledging his intricacies expose him to greater vulnerabilities? As they delved deeper into the planning, the rhythm of the conversation accelerated, ideas flowing between them like water over stones. Jack felt alive, invigorated by the exchange, his creative spirit rising. But just as he was beginning to envision the possibilities of his mural, a fleeting thought erupted in his mind. What would it take for him to truly own his narrative? A flicker of uncertainty remained, hovering at the edges of his mind. He realized that unveiling his art would mean more than just putting paint to canvas. It would force him to reckon with parts of himself he had long neglected. Jack, Beatrice interrupted his spiraling thoughts, what's the biggest fear you're confronting with this project? The question cut through the momentum, sending his mind racing. As he struggled to articulate his fears, the stakes of his journey unfurled ever higher, the artistic and personal risks converging into one significant challenge that forced him to question everything about his past, his identity, and a deeper purpose. Would he be courageous enough to step into the chaos of his own truth, or would this pursuit become another echo of his self-doubt? A pivotal moment loomed, and Jack sensed the ground shifting beneath him. Now, more than ever, he understood that uncovering his hidden layers might ultimately shape not just the mural, but who he would become in the process. The leap was imminent, and he was on the brink of a revelation, one that could potentially transform him into the artist he had yearned to be. Would he dare to dive in headfirst when the time came? In the weeks that followed, Jack found himself consumed by the project, the mural slowly transforming into a vivid tapestry of colors and emotions reflecting not just his journey but also the universal struggle of authenticity. Every stroke of paint was a cathartic release, and with each completed segment, he gradually felt the weight of his fears lift. The personal turmoil that once controlled him became fluid on canvas, morphing into something both beautiful and profound. At the gallery, Beatrice worked with him diligently, embracing the chaos of Jack's vision and translating it into a structured exhibition concept. They meticulously collaborated, bouncing ideas around like live wires. The mural grew to reveal shattered glass and fractured mirrors, symbols of how societal pressures often distort our true selves. Jack had transformed his earlier apprehension into a rallying call for authenticity and vulnerability, inviting viewers to peer beyond the surface. One afternoon, as Jack added final details, Beatrice stepped back and exclaimed, "Jack, this speaks volumes. You've managed to encapsulate something visceral." Her praise surged through him like a lightning bolt. For the first time in years, Jack recognized not only his artistic voice but also his rightful place in the art world. He felt no yearning for external approval, just a profound sense of accomplishment. Jack knew that sharing this work with the public would mean uncovering the raw edges of his personality, a confirmation of everything he had crafted. Each brushstroke had felt like a reckoning. The culmination of these efforts invited an intricate dialogue about identity, art, and truth, and as the opening day approached, anticipation bubbled within him. However, lingering doubts were never far from the surface, questions rattled in the back of his mind. Yet, on the eve of the exhibition, he leaned into those fears. That night, alone in the quiet of his studio, he contemplated the journey. The fear of judgment faded as he embraced the belief that his story could resonate with others' struggles. They didn't need to like it, they just needed to connect, just as he had through the act of creation. Day broke on the day of the exhibition, and Jack arrived early to prepare the gallery. The polished surfaces gleamed under the soft lighting. Guests would soon stream in, and the realization hit him the moment he had feared was now a reality. Yet, he felt exhilarated, not anxious. When the doors opened, people poured in, and the space filled with a mixture of laughter and conversation. Jack watched the initial expressions on visitors' faces as they encountered his work. Conversations erupted, the energy spiraling through the air, palpable and contagious. Eyes widened in recognition of their own buried feelings, and he found solace in their expressions. The pivotal moment came as Jack stood beside Beatrice. Two admiring visitors approached, their expressions serious. "This is incredible," one admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "It feels so real, so honest." Jack felt a warmth spreading through him at that moment, the validation he craved serving merely as a reminder of his journey, not the destination. Later that night, amidst the thriving conversations, he made his way toward Beatrice, who was beaming, her pride radiating through the gallery. "You did it, Jack," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "You conquered yourself and brought your truth forward." Jack realized, in that moment, that he had not just created a mural, he had established a legacy of authenticity. His legacy. It was a radical reclamation of his personal narrative, one that had been battered by regret. The shadows he once hid from had transformed into sources of light, illuminating the path toward self-acceptance and connection. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Jack remained inside, looking at the mural. His heart swelled with a profound sense of satisfaction. The exhibition was not the end, it was just the beginning, a tangible declaration of who he had become. Walking home alone. That night, he felt different. He had emerged empowered, with solid confidence in his sensibilities as an artist and a human being. Jack knew he would continue to explore the depths of his truth, never reverting to the shadowy corners of his past but forging ahead with relentless ambition. This final chapter reaffirmed Jack's transformation, his journey from a tarnished reputation to an establishment of purpose and significance. In that moment of achievement, he recognized that he was finally whole, an artist reborn. Jack paused at the threshold of his apartment, feeling an electric thrill course through his veins. The self he had always aspired to be was within reach. He was ready to evolve further, stepping confidently into whatever awaited him next. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep us going. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support and embrace the true power of personal transformation. Don't wait even one more second to share this journey.